Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Delphi Economic Forum and the organizers, I would like to welcome you to this session. It is an honor and a pleasure to have with us the Governor of Banco de Portugal, Mr. Carlos da Silva Costa. Can we have some quiet? As I said, he is the Governor of the Bank of Portugal. He is also a member of the Governing Council of the ECB. He is an economist, he is a banker, and he's a university professor as well, therefore well endowed to talk about what happened in Portugal. He started as a researcher with Banco Portuguesa do Atlântico. He spent about 12 years with the European Commission, first in the Portuguese representation and then as chef de cabinet of Commissioner Pinheiro at the time. Was the general manager of Millennium BCP for 4 years, chairman of Caixa Geral de Depósitos, a vice president of EIB for 6 years, and now in the very delicate and sensitive position of the governor of the Bank of Portugal, where, as all central bankers, has suffered his unfair share of problems. I think with all his previous capacities and experience, he is best placed to talk us through of how Portugal entered the crisis, how it handled and how it exited the crisis, and is now in what appears to be a sustainable growth trajectory. Obviously, the subject invites comparisons with Greece, and I'm sure the discussion will touch upon these comparisons. Just to make a point, when the crisis started, the Greek GDP per capita was at the 24,000 euros per person, and Portugal at 17. Now Greece is at 17 and Portugal at 19,000 euros per person. It shows the difference in approaching the beginning, the middle, and the end of the crisis. I'll give the governor 15 minutes to take us through his experiences and his views on the subject, and then I will turn to the audience for the discussion. Governor, your floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm very thankful to the organization for this invitation. Okay, thank you. It's okay. I'm very grateful for the invitation, and I'm very grateful also for this presentation. Thank you very much. As you have the text, I will do an overview because I think that is better after to have some time to discuss what has been written. I think that we need to understand that the Portuguese economy now is in recovery. We are growing. The banking sector is more robust. The debt is declining. And at the same time, the weight of exports on GDP has increased a lot during the last 8 years. What we need to understand, and I go to what has been written, we need to understand is what happened to be where we are, what were the main mistakes that were done, and how did we to solve the problem that we had at the 2010-2011. First, there is a point that we need to understand is between 1995 and 2007, we had a situation where we did several mistakes. These mistakes are, I will say, shared by several actors. It's not possible to pinpoint one actor. First of all, there was the reduction in interest rates and taxation of the capital markets after being sure that we will be part of monetary union. And this brought two phenomena that are important. First, the interest charges were declining, and at the same time, the access to finance were increasing. From the household sectors, there was a big increase in their indebtedness. From the corporate sector, there was a big increase in their indebtedness, and also from the public sector, there was a big increase in indebtedness. And this means that at the end of the period, we were with a big indebtedness that was shared by the three sectors. What we could ask ourselves is why it was like that. First of all, on the household sector, it was the result of a financial repression that we had till that moment, because it was not so easy to get funding. Second, the fact that the indebtedness was cheaper than before, and there was a demand that was liberated at that moment. It's normal. From the corporate sector, there was a situation that is different between the tradable and the non-tradable sector. In the tradable sector, I don't think that there was a big change, but in non-tradable sector, namely in the construction and the public works companies, there was a big increase in their activity that was dependent on state demand, and they increased their activity based on a big leveraging. At the same time, there was a leveraging associated with other sectors in the non-tradable sector. And at the end, what is important to understand is that economic policy was in some way creating an incentive for leveraging and also an incentive for going for the non-tradable sector, because the public demand was directed to the sectors that were linked with infrastructure, with domestic markets, and not increasing the potential growth of the economy, and at the same time creating an imbalance between tradable and the non-tradable sector. And the result of that is that we were suffering a big increase in indebtedness, and at the same time a decrease on domestic savings. Domestic savings was decreasing because households were decreasing their domestic saving. Domestic saving was decreasing because the state was increasing the amount of deficits. And at the same time, corporate sector was not increasing their capacity to self-financing. And when the markets became, I will say, became difficult, they were mistrusting the countries where the indebtedness was at the high level. It was the case of Portugal. And this situation, this change was very important in the case of Portugal because there was a mismatch between the provision of funding from external sector, from the abroad, and the use of these funds for investment or for residential investment. We were borrowing through the banking sector at short term, medium term, 3-4 years, and we were lending at 10 years, 8 years, more. And this means that there was a big mismatch in the balance sheet of the banks. At the time when the crisis came, when the markets were closed, what we saw was very clear. There were no access to the market, and at the same time, there were revolving credit that was stopping. This means that there were no capacity to continue to finance with new net finance, but at the same time, it was not possible to revolve financing that was at medium term or short term, and this means it became a very difficult situation. On the state side, if you think that we were with a deficit about 11% of GDP, you imagine what it means, the situation for the economy. It means that it was impossible to go ahead with the financing of the state and I will say with the level of expenditures that we had. it's important to distinguish between our situation, for instance, and the Ireland situation. The crisis in Portugal began by the sovereign, and after was impacting on the banking sector. In Ireland, for instance, it began on the banking sector and the impact on sovereign. This doesn't mean that the banking sector was not exposed. They were very exposed because they were the main channel to bring funding to the economy. If you look to the relation between their credits and their deposits, they were at 170%. This means that they were lending about 1/3 more than their capacity to collect deposits. And it means a big dependence on foreign funding. When the markets closed, it was clear that it was necessary to go for an adjustment program. Why? Because there was no way to ensure the continuity of the state activity without financial assistance. And it was critical to do that at that time. Why? Because otherwise it will be a situation of default. I'm speaking about March to May 2011. We did what was necessary to do, to ask for an assistance program. We did it and we prepared the agreement, the memorandum of understanding in a very short period of time. That is something that needs to be stressed. It was possible to get an agreement before being in a risk of a failure and before being on the cliff. And the second point that I need to make clear is that it was done during a period where the government in place was a caretaker government, and there was, I will say, an opposition looking for taking power. Even in that situation, it was possible to have an adjustment program, an assistance program that was signed before the elections. After the elections, the new government took on board the program, and this is one point that is very important for me to stress, is that the new government took the ownership of the program and took the responsibility to implement the program, even if the program was negotiated by the previous government as a caretaker. And this is very important because if we were in a situation where the new government will be not able to take over this program and to take as his own program, it will be very difficult. And if you ask me what is one of the pillars of success of Portuguese program, I will tell you is the first is ownership. During all the program, the government was able to respond and to assume the program. Why did it? First of all, it was critical. Second, there were in the, between social partners an ally that deserves to be, I will say, to be I was cited because it was very important. It was a trade union from the Social Democrat and the Socialist Party, trade union that is linked to them. And they were very important in acceptance of the program. And third point is that the population acceptance was clear. There was the idea between, among the population and between street people that it was needed to do. If we need to do, why to wait for that? And this is an important point that I need to stress because at one moment we were risking to lose this acceptance. It was a moment where we were looking for a change in the taxes concerning social security. There was a proposal to move them from the employers to the employees' side. There was a big demonstration, and the government was very clever to understand that it was time to go back and to abandon this proposal. It was a critical point because If we were passing this point without reflecting what was the social acceptance, it will be very difficult after to ensure social cohesion. And this means that the ownership of the program doesn't mean only that there was a government committed to it. There was a public acceptance. There was, I will say, a minimum feeling of fairness, and there was a feeling of need among the some people that count very much on trade unions. Where there were difficulties among, I will say, political parties, even those that were in power, because they were not so interested to pay the price for the adjustment. But there we had a very curious situation that the Prime Minister was able to say, I don't care about the next elections, I will go ahead with the program. And this is very important. Otherwise, I'm looking to, I need to be very short. It's very important, otherwise it will be difficult to go ahead with the program. We had all the program done. Second pillar is exports. We had a very fast reaction from the export side, and it was very critical in order to compensate the reduction on the non-tradable sector that is linked with the contraction of domestic demand, and same time to preserve employment and to preserve growth, and we did that. And third pillar that is very critical for, in my view, is the confidence on the banking sector. Notwithstanding that we had problems with some banks, no depositor lost any money, and this means confidence stood very, very strong. So I stay here and prepared to answer. You have my paper, and you can get from the paper my understanding of the situation.
Thank you very much, Governor. It was a very clear picture how a country of similar size and with a broadly similar economy responded to the challenges Greece was facing at the time and still, to an extent, is facing. The program ownership is the key thing I understood and makes the difference, in my view, for what happened to Portugal and Greece. Before taking it to the audience, I just wanted to ask you one question that you didn't mention, that NPLs in Portugal are about 14% of the bank's balance sheets. In Greece, it's 45%. How did it involve, why it's so low, given that you went through the same difficult patch?
First of all, the amount is a lot lower now than it was before. We came from 50 billion to 27 now. The amount of that is covered by collateral is above 55%. And the amount of that, if we take expect loss approach, is very small. The question now is not the quality of the balance sheet. The question now is the fact that these assets are not generating income and are consuming capital, and at the same time are uncertainty for investors. It's why it's very important to go ahead with the cleanup of the balance sheet. This means that the amount of these assets, non-performing assets or non-generating income assets, is well valued. The question is to know if the banks want to stay waiting for getting back the money and sacrificing the income, the ROA, the revenue on equity, or if they want to sell them to support some losses, and at the same time to increase their ROE, as it will clean up the balance sheet. But it's not a problem of quality of balance sheet, it's a question of profitability, short-term versus medium-term, and the need of capital if you want to clean up in a very fast way.
Any questions from the audience? The gentleman here.
I would like you to give us
If you could give us your name, please.
Sorry. My name is Alekos Papadopoulos. I'm an economist. I would like to ask to give us some indicative examples of what did you do in your country to manage to have this wide acceptance of the adjustment program? Because one of the things that we had issues here in Greece is that clearly our programs were not widely accepted.
I think that there are two or three points that you need to understand. First of all, it was not the first time that Portugal had an adjustment program. We did it in '78, we did it in '82. The memory was there. Second, it was clear from previous discussions that we were incurring an imbalance that was not sustainable, and this was discussed in public. Third, I think that there is also some, I use anthropological reasons linked to the way people react to the difficulties. Culture and anthropological. When people see a difficulty, they ask why not to solve it, and they are not looking to postpone it. The question is more on fairness of the costs, and it was where we were able to get a minimum acceptance, even if there were some criticism, namely from the non-tradable sector and namely from the public administration officers, because they were suffering a lot with the program.
Any other questions? Lady? Wait.
My name is Kalliopi Kondozoglu. I'm an architect, so I don't understand much about the economics of the affair. But my question is this: what was the role of the bank during the period when the politicians were borrowing and spending, and what was the role of the bank during the period when the consensus was formed?
First of all, during the first period, I was not the governor, but the bank did a lot of alerts about the increasing leveraging and the indebtedness of the private public sector. The question there is the following. It's not easy to close the bar when everything is going well, because as drinks are there, people are very happy to stay drinking. It's like that. Second, when the crisis came, we were very active on the drawing of the adjustment program. I was there. We are very active in what concerns preserving the banking confidence, and we were there. And for instance, for the moment, I'm very criticized for that by the fact that we did a resolution of a bank, big bank. But if you will be 10 years from now, you will see back and you will see we did what was necessary to do in order to preserve the confidence in the banking sector, because no depositor lost any money. And this is very important. And you did also the scanning of the banks.
I think we've run out of time. We only have 11, 10, 9 seconds before we explode. I would like to thank you, the Governor, for this very insightful presentation on how Portugal tackled the same problems like in Greece. I think there are lessons for Greece by large politicians and the people themselves and the industry and the banks. Regrettably, for Greece, we've run a long way and still haven't learned the lessons. Governor, thank you very much for all this information, your insights and your presence. Thank you.
Thank you.